where to prospect first. So my intention here, typically at the beginning of your career, because it sounds like obviously the majority of your deals are residential. When
Yes,
you're
sir.
starting to prospect in the commercial space, I want you to choose one asset class and I want you to get really, really, really good at it. And then as you start to build up your business, you're randomly going to be pulled in these directions where you're going to have a buyer who randomly calls you up, say, "Hey, I knew you just closed this deal," or, "My friend told me you're a great broker who does really well XYZ. I'm looking for a building of like this," and you're going to get pulled into another direction. When it arises, move in that direction. But to begin with, I'd recommend you go deep niche into one asset class.
Okay.
So what do you have any experience doing right now? You said you were doing some commercial leasing. What was that in?
Yeah, the commercial leasing that was actually out of state. It was in Indiana. So part of these like broker referrals, that's kind of where this commercial lease kind of came in. My broker gave me the opportunity to kind of hop on this deal with him, and we did a industrial lease out in Indiana. Locked up our client for 5 years, and then we're also going to be working on one of his buildings in South Carolina, partnering up with the broker over there for that deal.
Yeah.
So far, my experience has been industrial. I have a small amount of experience with retail. Actually, helped some of my friends get their coffee shops started. That's
Nice.
kind of like where my experience first started with all these things. So that's kind of like where I'm at right now in terms of the broker referrals. Once we got the Indiana lease all done, we made a few posts about it on social media and through my broker's funnel, or through his 20 years of experience. He had a couple of buddies reach out to him like, "Hey, we didn't know you guys were doing commercial. We're looking for more space, and now we're kind of dipping back into like the retail side of things."
Love it.
So that's kind of like where I'm at. Like we actually have like a lead that is interested in the space, and Wells Fargo is occupying some of it, and trying to like figure out the cap rates. Again, I'm new to all that stuff, but
Sure.
kind of feel like I'm in the right hands here with you, Henry.
I love it, man. Well, listen, I know every deal you come across, please feel free. You can send over information. We can review it together. It's like a partnership. I want you to see it that way. And so you don't ever feel like you're like, I don't know what to do with this, right? But yeah, so let's start with retail. It's a great place to start. Start prospecting for shopping centers or any size retail spot. I don't care if it's a single tenant all the way up to, dozens of tenants in a very large building. I mean, ideally, I'd probably even tell you to start prospecting a little bit smaller stuff. When I say small, though, in the retail shopping center space, I probably even tell you small should be like 8 to 10,000, right? Like sub 20,000 foot centers, sub 30,000 foot centers. Because, like, look, I mean, obviously, based on, just gonna be honest, what's gonna happen is you're gonna close one or two, and you're gonna be like, I could do an 80,000 foot, I could do a 300,000 foot center, because it's a lot of similar facets to it.
Mhm.
Like they're not infinitely different. What changes really is how you evaluate a neighborhood center with no national tenants versus a larger shopping center in a wonderful downtown, with national tenants in it. And how do you blend the cap rates accordingly? Kind of just making pivots and adjustments in that fashion, if that makes sense.
Start off with retail right now. I do have access to CoStar. So far, I
Okay.
feel like it's about like 50-50 sometimes. Sometimes I get directly to the owner. Sometimes I feel like I have to kind of dig a little bit more and do some research, so that's pretty much what I've been using.
The only other
Is
software I could recommend is Reonomy.
Okay.
I think Reonomy does a pretty good job with phone numbers. It's probably 20 or 30% more accurate than CoStar,
Gotcha.
but not infinitely more accurate, but definitely enough to be, to make it worth the money that you spend on it. Yeah, because CoStar, you can only pull 500, but you can pull unlimited lists of 500 numbers. So do you export the lead list and then put it into Mojo, or are you hand dialing, or what's the situation?
Just hand dialing. Yeah, just get the Excel spreadsheet straight from there, and then just hand dial.
Yeah,
If
so I would tell you
uh
to even if you're putting it on a credit card or whatever, at all costs essentially, get Mojo Dialer. Okay,
Okay.
not expensive. It's like 150 bucks, but your efficiency and effectiveness in the hours that you work, you'll probably triple or quadruple your efficiency. Because if you're hand dialing versus using an auto dialer, you're just going to be infinitely more effective.
So, like in terms of like trying to figure out like a current cap rate and stuff like that, how do you kind of just go about it? Is it like a simple little formula you just kind of plug into your calculator? Or,
Sure. So, and you're in what market right now?
I'm in Southern California.
SoCal.
So Yeah. So like for example, we get, some of our clients do business in other states. We have this other lead that wants us to look into a building that's out in Hawthorne, California, very very close to the coast.
Yep.
So we kind of cover this, little area. So I'd say from, Los Angeles, Orange County, and then maybe like an hour to 2 hours going east. So for
Awesome.
example, the listing appointment I have today is actually in Big Bear, California.
Sweet. Yeah, I met my wife in Orange County, so
Oh, sweet, man.
yeah, so I'm familiar with the area.
Yeah,
She
awesome.
she lived in Irvine.
Okay, nice.
So I love it, man. So let's look at it like this. In order to find cap rates, the best way you're going to use to do that is CoStar, and you're going to be, you take a property as an example. You take a subject property, 123 Main Street. This property you're going to, whatever it is, you plug it into CoStar. Now, I typically just, honestly, just because I use it so often, I use CoStar on my phone. So I'm going to give you just an example here. So let's do this. So I'm going to pull, let's just say, what's the address of the property you have that you're going to, Big Bear? Essentially, I got the property pulled up. What you're going to do next is I'm going to hit the X. Okay. And I want to go to the map view. Okay. So let me
Mhm.
just make sure that the property pulled up. So on the map view, I'm going to have this, it's going to give me like, the little dot saying that I pulled it up. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna zoom out a little bit and I'm gonna do like a little bit of I mean, sometimes you can do a radius search, sometimes you don't have to. But if you do
Mhm.
a radius just for mental clarity, you can go out like basically about, let's say, a mile. Okay. Try a mile first. 1 mile, hit done. Okay. So now I have a let's do this one more time here because 1 mile. So essentially, I'm going to go 1 mile out here from the property on your app, and then all I'm going to do is then I'm going to go to filter. You go at the top here. You have this bar. You're going to go to sale comps, retail, and then I'm just going to do sold in the last 2 years. Sold in the
Mhm.
last 2 years, and then I'm going to get a bunch of properties that pop up. I'm going to start with 2 years just because sometimes if you go back 1 year, you might not have enough comps. But all I'm going to
Mhm.
try to do is I'm going to try to pull. I'm going to go back to, let's go 1 year first, and I'm going to do square footage, property size above 10,000 feet and below 40,000 feet because our subject property I think is like 20,000 square feet. So I'm doing 10 to 40,000 because a property that's like 3,000 square feet doesn't comp. If a property is 100,000 square feet, doesn't comp too much. Okay. Anyways, I got 9 properties that come up here. Okay. And I'm just going to scroll through them. Okay. And all that I have here is one says it's a shopping center sold for 213 a foot. Another one that's 14,500 feet sold for 212 a foot. And then the other ones do not even have they're undisclosed, right? It's like undisclosed price. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back farther now, right? Like now that we know that we only have two comps here, I want to go back farther. Thankfully, over the last 2 years, the market's been roughly the same, right? Economically wise. So I'm just going to keep looking for more comps. So I got 221 a foot now, 227, 245, and then one's 363. So if we take all those numbers, and we calculate like an average, right? We got 212, 213, 221, 245, and 363. I'm going to ignore the 363. And we just basically have let's see, do 12, 13 is 25, plus 21 is 46. 46 plus 27 is 54, 53, 73. Let's see, 173 plus 40. One second. It's 178, 128. Okay, 128 divided by 5 comps. What do we got? 128 divided by 5 is like 25. So basically, like 225.6 is the average price per square foot, okay, that these are all trading for. Okay.
Okay.
So number one thing we need is price per square foot. We want to know that. So before cap rate, price per square foot is very, very, very important. The reason being is because you look at it like in the residential world, for comparables, right? When you're trying to know if you have a good deal, more so than let's say a price. Like if we're just thinking overall, if you have 5 houses, okay, and they're all for $500,000, how would you know which one's the right? How do you know which one's a really good deal and which one's a terrible deal? How would you know?
Yeah. You start looking into like the details of them, the current condition, any
Okay, great.
improvements and
Condition
things like
one.
that.
Great. Condition one. Number two is what?
Any improvements that have been done over the property, or maybe something that it's lacking, maybe it needs a new roof,
Okay,
probably
what like
needs.
I also think about like square footage, right? Like so it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, if one's 20,000 square feet and they're selling it for 500 grand, and then another one's listed for 1,000 square feet, I'm like, okay, well, the 20,000 square foot house at 500 grand is a better deal.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Even though hypothetically they both could be rented for the same amount of money, Okay, this is why it works for the same thing whether it's houses or properties, right? So like shopping centers, right? They're not all built the same. So it's like even if two properties are at the same exact price, they're both listed for $5 million, okay, and they both bring in, let's say, $250,000 in income, net operating income. So they're both 5% cap rates. But one shopping center is 40,000 feet and the other shopping center is 10,000 square feet. Which one's a better deal?
Yeah, 40,000 all day.
Well,
Yeah.
more likely than not if they're in the same area, right? Now,
Hmm.
obviously, if the 40,000 square foot center is in the middle of Kentucky, maybe it's not as good of a deal as if hypothetically the 10,000 square foot one is in, Miami Beach
Yeah.
or Rodeo Drive, right? So it's like figuring out these small nuances. One thing I look at is price per square foot. So it's like, okay, I want to know that I have below market price per square foot. Number one. Number two, you're asking about cap rates. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, when you're looking on CoStar, they don't really have an easy way to look at it other than you clicking into the deal and going to like the summary page. And sometimes they have it and sometimes they don't. They don't always have it. See if I can try to find one that actually has it here. And okay, great. So this one has one. So this one, which is 25,500 square feet, shows that it sold at a 5.85% cap. I don't know how well you can see that, but 5.89% cap rate. So CoStar will give you that detail on some of them, not all of them. Okay.
Hmm.
But it's good to see that again a property sold at 213 a foot at a 589 cap. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna round up a little bit and say like, hey, a 6 is pretty much a benchmark at roughly 213 a foot. So I know if my property, if I can get it for less than 213 a foot and for higher than a 6 cap, my odds of selling this deal are pretty good, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, right. So then, and obviously, the better of a price per square foot and the higher the cap rate I can find it at, right, or negotiate it to be, the more likelihood I'm going to have in selling the deal. So it's just that simplistic, right? Like it doesn't have to be overly complicated, right? So when you're looking at these deals, especially for SoCal, you're probably going to be in and around a 6. Now, the better quality of the deal, you might be edging towards a 5. The worse of the deal, you might be edging towards a 7. It obviously also is very important to look at the types of tenancy in the shopping center, right? So the one I just showed you that sold at a 589 cap, they have, I mean, a ton of different tenants. Okay. They have a ton of tenants. Yeah. So it looks like they have, at least even just in the image that I'm looking at of the center, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tenants. And that's just what I can see in the picture. And they probably have more. Even though if you look at CoStar, it literally says they have 2 tenants and it says that CVS is taking up the entire building. So you got to do a little bit more digging than just relying 100% on CoStar. But that's why, again, when I'm looking at this has 9 tenants, which diversifies risk. Also, when you have a CVS, I'm not a huge fan of CVS as a tenant right now, right? Because of the nonsense turmoil that's going on with CVS's closing, Walgreens closing. So it's like, it's a little bit scary of a thing to have a huge tenant like CVS taking up 10,000 of a 20,000 foot center. If they go out, you're screwed. So in your building, if you're bringing your building back up, 23,000 square foot, they have a huge tenant, which is, like we talked about the bank. It also looks like it's mostly office, not really retail.
Correct. Yeah. So the person that we are working with that's interested in the building, they were looking to lease out. It's a 3-story building. The first floor is Wells Fargo, and then the second and third floor are currently vacant. They were looking to lease out some of that space to run I believe it's just like a medical office or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then they were like, hey, how about we just try to buy the building instead? And then just keep that Wells Fargo tenant in there. So that's kind of like the digging I started doing over the weekend and stuff like that.
Got it.
So I kind of got already, I was able to get in contact directly with the owner through CoStar. He let me know, what the terms are with Wells Fargo, how much they're paying right now. And so kind of just slowly piecing things together with the information that I've been getting.
Well, look, did you find out how much they're paying in rent right now, the Wells Fargo?
Yeah, they're paying about I believe it's 27,500. That's what they're paying right now, and then their lease doesn't expire till 2030. They have a 5-year option to lease after that.
So the 27,500, is that gross or is that gross plus cam or what is it?
That's going to be gross plus cam. Yeah.
Okay, so they're paying some cam. Okay, great. So what does that come to on a price per square foot basis?
That would come to, let's see here, 100.
How much are they occupying?
They occupy about 10,000 square feet.
Well, 27 times 12 is 324. And if they occupy, you said how much? 10,000?
10,000 square feet.
Okay, so that's $32.40 a foot. Gross.
Okay.
You take the gross number times 12, divided by the square footage.
Times 12 divided by the
Yeah,
square
so whatever the
footage.
monthly
Okay.
rent is, if it's gross rent, multiply it by 12, you get 320, 324. Well, 327, it would be actually, sorry, 330. Yeah, 330, because of the 500, I was just doing 27 times 12. 27 and a half times 12 is 330,000 divided by 10,000 square feet is $33 a square foot gross. So 33 a foot gross. And, did the Wells Fargo owner, the building owner, did they give you a price?
No, no, yeah, I was trying to dig that out of them, but they didn't want to
They said,
show their
make me an
cards
offer.
first.
They just said, make me an offer.
Pretty much like, hey, this is kind of the information I can give you. Do your research and let me know what your client wants to offer.
So look, our philosophy, okay, now different than most corporate brokers, different than a lot of residential agents, right? Like, my intention when we get a property, we make an offer on the property. Now, the
Okay.
reason why we do that is to pre-negotiate the deal, okay? Because sometimes you have sellers like this, which is make me an offer. I'm
Yeah.
not giving you a price, make me an offer.
Right.
The first thing I'm going to think of is like, okay, fine, I'll make you an offer, right? Like, but sometimes the buyer's like, well, I don't want to say the first number, right?
Right.
And then you go to the
Yeah.
buy, and then you're in this weird predicament where like you have a deal that you might be able to put together if the seller or the buyer would just give you a number first. So I'm like, I'll always just go first. I don't care. What happens now is that I present an offer to the seller of X price to pre-negotiate for the buyer. And then I finally get the seller to give me a number. And then I can take that number and I can go to the buyer and try to get an offer of some sort. This way I don't waste any time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just to kind of get things going at least.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in this situation, right, like now, just like we did for the shopping center 2 seconds ago, you pull up some comps for office buildings in the same location, same 1 year time horizon. What do they all sell for? And then you have different ranges of price per square foot that these traded for. But if we look at the bigger stuff, I mean, this one building is absolutely stunning and sold for a crazy price per square foot. So I don't even know if we're going to count it. All glass, absolutely spectacular, beautiful building. This sold for 300 and something plus a foot, 324 foot. But then you look at another one, which is around 200,000 square feet, a little bit closer to what you have, sold for 180 a foot. 200,000 square feet of office just sold in February, and it sold for 180 a foot. Let's see if it gives me a cap rate. It does not. So in 2019, this building, okay, 200,000 square feet of office sold for $55 million, 265 a foot. And then it just sold, this is a great thing to show the seller, and it just sold for 180 a foot. So it sold for 37.5 million after it sold for 55 million 6 years ago. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
that's a pretty good comp to throw in there.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll send this to you. This will be a good property for you to send over to that seller for sure. So let's also last but not least here, because I obviously want to make sure that you can leave here and kind of come out with a game plan. Keep in mind that when you're prospecting for these deals, just like if you're circle prospecting for a seller in the residential world, right? Some are going to be correct numbers. Some people are going to be obviously not that interested in selling, and some of them are going to say like, "Hey, if I'm open to the idea of selling, make me an offer, tell me what you think it's worth." All that's the same exact kind of concept for the commercial world, like it is for the residential world. Very similar. However, the difference that I would tell you for the commercial world is that I always like to prospect on behalf of a buyer, prospect for a purpose, right? So like you have a buyer in mind, you're like, oh, okay, like I have this buyer who's looking for X type of property. Like this guy is looking for office buildings. I'm going to prospect for office buildings in this downtown area that I know they want to be in. Because if I find an office building that a seller is open to hearing an offer on or considering selling, I know I have a decently or a much more likely scenario that we're going to sell this property versus the idea of, oh, like I'm just going to randomly call this random downtown corridor of California for office buildings, even though I don't have anybody who's looking to buy it. Like the difference also, because in residential, you can circle prospect and any property you come across, you're like, sure, would you like to list it for sale? No problem, right? That's no problem.
Mhm.
But in the commercial world, what's going to end up happening is that if you randomly just come up across somebody who's open to the idea of selling and you randomly list it for sale and you have no buyers, the odds of you double ending that deal is not likely.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
my team and I look to double end every single transaction that we possibly can,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, because then it'll just be like residential, just putting it on market and
Exactly.
advertising it. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Which, by the way, every single commercial broker that we, like that, a lot that we work with, and a lot that watch the content, and a lot all over the country that are more corporate minded or have been taught from the corporate world, right? They come into this thinking like, oh, I'm just going to list every property for sale, right? But then this is why properties expire. This is why a lot of brokers take incredibly high price listings. This is why a lot of properties don't sell, right? Because
yeah,
they don't even have a buyer for it. They just convince the seller of the idea that, oh, we can market it really well for you. I'm like,
yeah, yeah,
number
yeah.
one, if I have a buyer, I don't need to list it for you. Why would I need to list it?